Heaven Official's Blessing. Chapter 111. Audio source: WuXiaWorldAudiobook.com. Fight the Reverend. Crown Prince takes Wind Master's place. However, even though contours of the surrounding trees and branches could now be distinguished, he just couldn't make out the face of that black shadow no matter what, like there was a cloud of demonic black mist swirling around that figure. The Windmaster fan of the Windmaster was a first-rate spiritual device. It could blow away demonic auras and bring order to the world. Having received the spell Qi Shi Qingxian passed on to him, Xie Lian recited it in his mind and swept the fan. A whirlwind instantly blew up from the ground, whooshing and shaking the surrounding woods, and even a few small, weaker sprouts were pulled from their roots, a strength powerful to behold. Unfortunately, this wind was blown a little off course and didn't aim for the right target. Spiritual devices weren't that easy to manipulate. He wasn't a master to the Windmaster fan after all, and naturally couldn't handle it as smoothly as Shi Qingxian. The angle and amount of power were both difficult to control. It was either too strong or too weak, either off course or backwards. After realizing this, Xie Lian resolutely gave up and changed tactics, snapping the fan shut and used it as an attacking weapon directly instead as he madly struck at the weak points of the other. Then, with a wish, he generated a sheen of spiritual aura on the edge of the fan, and straight up turned it into a razor-sharp steel blade, slashing through the air, its shine chilling. Shi Qingxian probably figured out what happened and cried in despair. "Your Highness, what's wrong with you? That's my spiritual device. I can't believe you're using it as a martial weapon. What a waste of God's gift." This was a problematic habit all martial gods had. In the midst of being occupied, Xie Lian spared a moment to say flatly, "It's all the same. Makes no difference." Hua Cheng's tone was becoming harsher. Gurgur. Xie Lian knew what he was pressing for, and as he fought, he rapidly swept his eyes around to look at his surroundings. There were mountains and rivers, towers and pavilions, really nothing that stood out, and really nothing that could determine where he was. That Reverend of Empty Words noticed his movement, and probably guessed his objective as it suddenly said, "You're not Shi Qingxian." Xie Lian never paused in his attack, but his mind turned rapidly. Usually it shouldn't take this fast to figure out the soul-shifting spell was used, so how did it immediately realize I'm not Shi Qingxian? Well, whatever. Keep going. The way he fought was insensible and insensitive. That Reverend of Empty Words seemed to not be able to take the beating anymore, and he said, "You'll fall down this instant." Sure enough, it started to curse predictions at Xie Lian directly. However, it was like Xie Lian heard nothing and only beat harder. That Reverend of Empty Words then said, "You're going to be defeated in battle." Xie Lian laughed. "I was already defeated 800 years ago, a few more rounds means nothing to me. How much more can I be defeated? Just give up. Nothing you say to me will work." Gurgur, Hua Cheng called. "If you can't determine your location, just fan up a whirlwind into the sky with a Windmaster fan and I'll know where you are." What a coincidence. Xie Lian just thought of the same idea. "Alright." And just as he was about to raise his hand, suddenly that Reverend of Empty Words let out a creepy chuckle. "Someone's coming?" Xie Lian became alarmed for some reason, and sure enough that creature said in a low voice, "Don't worry, you will watch with your eyes wide open. The person coming to seek you die right before you." Hearing this, Xie Lian couldn't laugh anymore. His heart dropped violently, and even his breathing stopped in that moment. The next second, he actually yelled out loud, "Shut up!" In a flash, more than 50 heavy kicks landed on that Reverend of Empty Words, each bashing right on its head, and it could barely speak from the attack, yet it sighed deeply. That was a sigh of satisfaction, like it had tasted some sacred delicacy, and it laughed coldly. Accidentally dropping his guard, Xie Lian actually let it suck what it wanted from him. However, Xie Lian hadn't the mind to notice because those words earlier truly did make his heart feel like it was struck violently. Even if he knew Hua Cheng wouldn't. die before him so easily as that creature said, and to be real, Watching was already dead, but still a deep, uncontrollable panic manifested. He didn't realize he couldn't even stand to hear that very idea. Although those in the spirit communication array didn't notice anything amiss, it was like Watching was telepathic and became alarmed. Gurgur, is it saying something to you? Xie Lian replied. It's saying nonsense. No, it said nothing. Watching understood immediately and cursed. It's seeking its own death. Tell me right now and I'll go straight over. Xie Lian hastily said. No need, don't come over. Absolutely do not come over. Sorry to interrupt, Shi Qingshan spoke up. I say, the two of you really did exchange verbal passwords secretly, right? Your Highness, did you not notice? You got the wrong array. It was only then did Xie Lian discover that ever since he used the soul-shifting spell, every word Watching said to him was passed through their private spirit communication array. But because he was focused on fighting with his heart a mess on top of that, he hadn't realized it and responded directly in the main spirit communication array. Now, the fact that they connected private communication was utterly exposed. However, there was no time to be embarrassed, and Xie Lian said, It's nothing. Give me half an incense time. I can take care of this thing. After that, he plugged his ears anew and his attacks became even more vicious, focusing only on dealing with the Reverend of Empty Words. However, he had no idea that back at the town of Fujiyu, after Watching heard his words, he raised his hand and smacked bashing Mingyi 3 feet into the ground. Then, he immediately turned to the Shi Qingshan who took over Xie Lian's shell. Switchback. Shi Qingshan had already planned on changing back immediately, but seeing the sight, he hurriedly said, Crimson Rain Softflower, what are you doing? I'll switch back right now. His Highness is helping me, so it makes more sense if you hit me. Why did you hit Ming Shang? But the moment the words left his lips, he realized that he was currently in Xie Lian's body, so of course Watching wouldn't hit him. If he must hit someone, then it could only be Mingyi. On the other side, Xie Lian was immersed in the fight, but he suddenly heard Shi Qingshan yelling in the spirit communication array. Your Highness, can you please plug the ears deeper and run further away? I'm switching back. Lord Wind Master, will you be alright? Xie Lian asked. I can't fight it, but I can still run away. Shi Qingshan replied. Thus, Xie Lian gave that Reverend of Empty Words one final kick, making it fly out a few miles away, then turned around to flee wildly, but then he stopped. Wait, you don't need to run away. Let me set up a protection array for you. Lord Windmaster, do you have any protection spiritual devices on you? If you don't, precious gems and treasures can do too. Hearing him, Shi Qingshan hastily replied, Treasure? I've got them. Feel around my neck, there's a longevity locket, will that do? Xie Lian felt around and sure enough Shi Qingshan was wearing a long golden longevity locket, its golden light exquisite and opulent. He said, delighted. Yes. This is a rare treasure, excellent. Really? Shi Qingshan said. I've got more. There's a jade belt around my waist, an agate ring on my finger, some pearls on my boots, the sandalwood handle of the whisk is older than you, oh, and apparently the hairs of the whisk are also rare, plucked from some spiritual beast. In one breath he told of 7 or 8 items, then he continued. In any case, Your Highness, just take a look and see if everything on me can be used. Yes, they could be used. And they're all extremely rare treasures. Xie Lian was shocked. As expected of the god of wealth, as expected of the younger brother of the water master. He said, they can all be used. I'll find a house nearby to set up an array. When you're switched back, keep the earplugs still and don't look outside. Stay in the house and don't go out. Wait until we come. Shi Qingshan was going to break down in sobs. Your Highness, you're too reliable. Thank you. From today onwards you're my second best friend. From now on this Wind Master will never forget you in any good endeavors. Xie Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and responded politely, "Thank you." Between their exchanges, that reverend of empty words was left far behind. Glancing around, Xie Lian found a small pavilion nearby and charged in, shutting and locking all the doors and windows with a wave of his hand. He then wrapped the golden longevity locket around the door latch, bit blood from his finger to draw a spell. Then he laid out all the treasures in formation, drawing a blood array. All of these actions were done in a short amount of time, and finally he sat in the center of the room, closing his eyes. 1, 2, 3. Soul-shifting spell return. It was like he was violently thrown high into the sky again and plunged. After a wave of whirling, Xie Lian once again felt his feet touch the ground. Unsteady, he was going to fall over, but before he did, a pair of hands caught and supported him. He opened his eyes and heard Hua Cheng's voice from above, dark and grave. "Gerger, I think you better explain yourself." Xie Lian grabbed his arm and steadied himself. He was just about to speak when he suddenly realized someone was missing and asked, "Where's Lord Earth Master?" "Who knows?" Hua Cheng said. Xie Lian was taken aback. "Who knows?" Then he looked to the side. There was a human-shaped crater on the ground, and Ming Yi was slowly crawling out of that hole. He stopped talking, speechless for the moment. In the spirit communication array, Shi Qingshan's voice came. "Eh?" Xie Lian tensed. Did it come? Having used so many of Shi Qingshan's treasures to form the array, he made sure the defense of that house was indestructible, and that Reverend of Empty Words shouldn't be able to intrude. Even if it was powerful, it would still take time. However, Shi Qingshan said, No, Your Highness, this array is impressive, steady like the mountains. It really does feel secure. I think nothing can break in the next 3 days and 3 nights. It's just, I can't believe it's this place." "What place? Do you recognize it?" Xie Lian asked. "Of course I recognize it," Shi Qingshan replied. "This is the Terrace of Cascading Wine. It's where I ascended." Xie Lian was taken aback, thinking, the Terrace of Cascading Wine? Shi Qingshan seemed to have made a round of the room and said firmly again, "That's right. I come back to this place every few decades to check up on it. I'm not mistaken." No wonder that Reverend of Empty Words knew immediately that the one in the shell wasn't the real Shi Qingshan. If it was the man himself, by just one look he would have known it was the Terrace of Cascading Wine, and there wouldn't be any need to look around to make sure. Ever since Ming Yi had crawled out of the hole, he squatted down on the ground to start drawing an array. After a few strokes were drawn, however, he suddenly raised his hand and blasted away the array entirely. Hua Cheng's eyes immediately grew cold, and Xie Lian was also taken aback. "Lord Earth Master, what are you doing?" Ming Yi rose to his feet and said, "The distance-shortening array doesn't work anymore. We have to walk over." "What do you mean it doesn't work anymore?" Xie Lian exclaimed. "It means just now, someone or something destroyed all the connection points of the distance-shortening array near the Terrace of Cascading Wine." "No, the entire area's connection points have been destroyed. Not long ago, Shi Qingshan was clearly brought over to the Terrace of Cascading Wine via the distance-shortening array. But it seemed that as soon as Shi Qingshan hid himself inside the pavilion, that Reverend of Empty Words immediately reacted and tampered, intentionally slowing them down. This was no different than having the mountain paths destroyed when crossing a mountain. Now, no one could even dream of using the distance-shortening array to get close to the Terrace of Cascading Wine. If we leave now, how long will it take before we get there?" Xie Lian asked. Ming Yi had already turned around and started walking. "An hour," Xie Lian called out in the spirit communication array. "Lord Wind Master, we're heading over to where you are now. You just wait until we get there. If anything knocks, absolutely do not open the door." All right. Of course," Shi Qingshan said. "Even if you didn't say anything, I already know. Don't take me for a 3-year-old who'd open the door to anybody. Now then, my lords, please hurry." "Okay." Fortunately, the town of Fujiu and the terrace of Cascading Wine weren't on either ends of the earth, and was still within acceptable distance of each other. If they hurried over now, they should still make it in time. The three immediately took off. On the way, Xie Lian casually worked his powers and discovered that the soul-shifting spell really did burn out quite a bit aggressively. And that powerful wave Hua Cheng poured into him was already used up over more than half. Hua Cheng noticed his movements and asked, "Gerger, do you need more?" Xie Lian hastily shook his head. "No, really, thanks San Lang ever so much for being so generous earlier." "You're welcome," Hua Cheng said. "I already said, you can take as much as you want." After a pause, he then added half-jokingly, "But when Gerger pays me back, can I collect some interest?" Xie Lian cleared his throat softly, thinking it's probably an issue whether if he could even pay anything back, but of course his lips were still bold. "Yes, sure." Although it was determined to be an hour, but the three of them weren't mortals and it was a dire situation, so naturally they were going faster. When they arrived at the terrace of Cascading Wine, Xie Lian took a look, and sure enough it was the same place as before. All around was the chaotic mess created by his misuse of the Wind Master fan. The fan refused his control and blew over trees and bushes, and Xie Lian was feeling a little embarrassed. "Your Highness, which building did you set up the spiritual array? Do you remember?" Mingyi asked. Of course Xie Lian remembered and was also searching for it attentively. Soon, his eyes lit up and pointed his finger. "It's that small pavilion." The three walked towards the small pavilion. The closer they got, the more relaxed they became, as if they saw the ray of hope. However, when they approached, Xie Lian's pupils instantly shrank. The doors to that small pavilion were open, creaking eerily as they swung back and forth in the chilling night air. End chapter.